Good evening, everyone. I'm Megan Fox. I write with pjmedia.com, and tonight we are doing chapter 4 of Candace Bushnell's Sex and the City. I will be reading to you, so get your drinks ready. If you are having a cocktail this evening, a Manhattan would be my choice. I'm sticking with coffee at the moment because, again, my allergies are acting up, so I try to avoid bothering my allergies with alcohol. So coffee it is, but coffee is good. All right, let's find where we left off. Oh, by the way, we have new merch, and I have created these mugs for you guys. If you have been listening to my program, you know that I'm very concerned about Americans and why we can't be friends anymore. So I've made these mugs that say "Make Americans Friends Again." And if you guys want to support the show and support what I'm doing here, go ahead and pick one up. There's also a couple of funny ones based on pronouns. Oh, the Make Americans Friends Again comes in a beer glass, so you can have a beer with your Democrat or Republican next door neighbor and be friendly instead of ignoring each other and being terrible. It can go a long way to repairing relationships in America by just, sharing a cold one together. And you can do that now with my glasses that say, Make Americans Friends Again. Okay, so chapter 4. Moving on. Here, let's get started. Chapter 4, Manhattan Wedlock. Never married women, toxic bachelors. Lunch the other day. Vicious gossip with a man I'd just met. We were discussing mutual friends, a couple. He knew the husband, I knew the wife. I'd never met the husband, and I hadn't seen the wife in years, except to run into her occasionally on the street. But as usual, I knew everything about the situation. It's going to end badly, I said. He was naive, a country mouse. He came from Boston and he didn't know anything about her, and she jumped at the opportunity. She'd already gone through so many guys in New York, and she had a reputation. No guy in New York would have married her. I attacked my fried chicken, warming up to the subject. Women in New York know. They know when they have to get married, and that's when they do it. Maybe they'd slept with too many guys, or they know nothing's ever going to really happen with their career, or maybe they really do want kids. Until then, they put it off as long as they can. Then they have that moment, and if they don't take it, I shrugged. That's it. Chances are they'll never get married. I feel like this is why Miranda decided to get married to Steve. Like she was at remember the last Miranda and Steve part 3, I think I did, or maybe it was part 2. It was her saying, what if there's somebody better? What if somebody better comes along? Like she's going through all of these men and yet not seeing the prize that Steve is right in front of her. So maybe that's where they got this from, because that's pretty interesting. The other guy at the table, a corporate doting dad type who lives in Westchester, was looking at us in horror. But what about love? He asked. I looked at him pityingly. I don't think so. When it comes to finding a marriage partner, New York has its own particularly cruel mating rituals. As complicated and sophisticated as those in an Edith Wharton novel. Everyone knows the rules, but no one wants to talk about them. The result is that New York has bred a particular type of single woman, smart, attractive, successful, and never married. She is in her late 30s or early 40s, and if empirical knowledge is good for anything, she probably never will get married. This is not about statistics or exceptions. We all know about the successful playwright who married the beautiful fashion designer a couple of years older than he is. But when you're beautiful and successful and rich and know everyone, the normal rules don't apply. Oh, let me tell you something. That is so true. The normal rules do not apply to the elite anywhere. And that we should see this in every aspect of our lives. The elite do not play by the same rules, and they don't have the same lives as we do. They don't obey the same laws, because for them, all it takes is a very expensive lawyer and they'll get off, while you will serve the rest of your life in prison for doing the stuff they do. It's terrible. It's real injustice. That's the systemic injustice that I see. It's the elites against everybody else. So it's interesting that even way back then, she she knew that and said it. What if, on the other hand, you're 40 and pretty and you're a television producer or you have your own PR company, but you still live in a studio and sleep on a fold-out couch? The 90s equivalent of a Mary Tyler Moore. Except unlike Mary Tyler Moore, you've actually gone to bed with all these guys instead of demurely kicking them out at 12 a.m. What happens to those women? There are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of women like this in the city. We all know lots of them, and we all agree they're great. They travel, they pay taxes, they'll spend $400 on a pair of Manolo Blahnik strappy sandals. There isn't, I can't, I'm sorry, but like even back in the day when we were watching the show and like Carrie would blow all of her money on these shoes, I'd be like, what are you doing? Why? Now, admittedly, my feet have never been in a $500 pair of shoes. Maybe something magical occurs when you slip your foot into a Manolo Blahnik that I don't know about. But it wouldn't matter if I did know about it. I'm never going to spend $500 on a pair of shoes. Like literally never. That's not happening. Again, these are elite people problems. Like Manolo Blahniks, $500. Come on. They can't be that much different, can they? High heels are high heels. They all hurt. My best friend, though, who married a bazillionaire, she swears that there is a big difference between Italian-made shoes and the other crap we're buying at the department stores or whatever, and that it really does make a difference. Next time I go to her house, I'm going to go in her closet and walk around in her shoes, and I'll let you know. Although she has bigger feet than me, so they're probably not going to feel good. All right. There's nothing wrong with these women, said Jerry, 39, a corporate lawyer who happened to marry one of these smart women, 3 years older than he is. They're not crazy or neurotic. They're not fatal attraction. Jerry paused. Why do I know so many great women who aren't married and no great guys? Let's face it, the unmarried guys in New York suck. I had the same exact problem. I had single girlfriends for a while after I got married and they would always say, like, can't you set me up? Don't you know anybody? Doesn't your husband know anybody? I knew all these single girls and no great single guys. It was true. I don't know why. The M&Ms. Here's the deal, Jerry said. There's a window of opportunity for women to get married in New York, somewhere between the ages of 26 and 35, or maybe 36. We agreed that if a woman's been married once, she can always get married again. There's something about knowing how to close the deal. But all of a sudden, when women get to be 37 or 38, there's all this stuff, he said. Baggage. They've been around too long. Their history works against them. If I were single and I found out that a woman had gone out with Mort Zuckerman or Marvin, a publisher, the M&Ms, forget it. Who wants to be 20th on that line? And then if they pull any of those other stunts, like children out of wedlock or rehab stays, that's a problem. Jerry told a story. Last summer, he was at a small diner in the Hamptons. The guests were in TV and movies. He and his wife were trying to fix up a 40-year-old former model with a guy who had just gotten divorced. The two were talking, and suddenly something came up about Mort Zuckerman, and then Marvin, and suddenly Jerry and his wife were watching the guy turn off. There's a list of toxic bachelors in New York, said Jerry, and they're deadly. Later in the day, I relayed the story to Anna, who's 36, and who's had a habit of disagreeing with everything men say. All guys want to sleep with her, and she's constantly chewing them out for being shallow. She's dated the M&Ms, and she knows Jerry. When I told her the story, she screams, Jerry is just jealous. He'd like to be like those guys, except he doesn't have the money or the power to pull it off. Scratch the surface, and every guy in New York wants to be Mort Zuckerman. George, 37, an investment banker, is another guy who sees the toxic bachelors as a problem. These guys, the plastic surgeon, that Times editor, the crazy guy who owns those fertility clinics, oh, that guy. I think they mean the guy who was like impregnating women with his own sperm. That really happened. They all take out the same pool of women, and it never goes anywhere, he said. Yeah, if I meet a woman who had gone out with all those guys, I wouldn't like it. Kids or lingerie? If you're Diane Sawyer, you'll always be able to get married, said George. But even women who are A's and A minuses can miss out. The problem is, in New York, people self select down to smaller and smaller groups. You're dealing with a crowd of people who are enormously privileged, and their standards are incredibly high. And then there are all your friends. Look at you, George said. There's nothing wrong with any of the guys you've gone out with. But we always give you shit about them. That was true. All of my boyfriends have been wonderful in their own way, but my friends have found fault with every one of them, mercilessly chewing me out for putting up with any of their perceived, but in my mind, excusable flaws. Now I was finally alone, and all of my friends were happy. 2 days later, I ran into George at a party. It's all about having children, he said. If you want to get married, it's to have kids, and you don't want to do it with someone older than 35 because then you have to have kids immediately, and then that's all it's about. I decided to check with Peter, 42, a writer with whom I'd had 2 dates. He agreed with George. It's all about age and biology, he said. You just can't understand how immense the initial attraction is to a woman of childbearing years. Well, that's a natural thing. It's a natural attraction. It's pheromones. It's science. For a woman who's older, 40 maybe, it's going to be harder because you're not going to feel that strong initial attraction. It's true. You'll have to see them a lot before you want to sleep with them, and then it's about something else. Sexy lingerie, perhaps? I think the issue of unmarried older women is conceivably the biggest problem in New York City. Peter snapped, then thoughtfully added, It provides torment for so many women, and a lot of them are in denial. Peter told a story. He has a woman friend, 41. She'd always gone out with extremely sexy guys and just had a good time. Then she went out with a guy who was 20 and was mercilessly mocked. Then she went out with another sexy guy her age and he left her, and suddenly she couldn't get any more dates. She had a complete physical breakdown and couldn't keep her job and had to move back to Iowa to live with her mother. This is beyond every woman's worst nightmare, and it's not a story that makes men feel bad. Well, the answer to all of this is to marry early and have your kids young, because I can tell you from experience, having a baby at almost 40 nearly killed me. Like, I started too late. I had my first at 30 and my last at 40, and holy cow, there was a huge difference. So, there's a huge difference in energy levels and keeping up with a toddler in your 40s. It sucks. It sucks. Start early. And there is something to be said about your sexual attraction. You have a window. Obviously, there's this, not that, you can't be sexy at any age, but what they're talking about, the biological reality of childbearing years, women in their childbearing years being the most attractive. It's true. I mean, it's just true. It's just, you can't get around that. It is science. Roger's version. Roger was sitting in a restaurant on the Upper East Side, feeling good and drinking red wine. He's 39, and he runs his own fund and lives on Park Avenue in a classic 6 apartment. He was thinking about what I'll call the mid-30s power flip. When you're a young guy in your 20s and early 30s, women are controlling the relationships, Roger explained. By the time you get to be an eligible man in your late 30s, you feel like you're being devoured by women. In other words, suddenly the guy has all the power. It can happen overnight. Roger said he'd gone to a cocktail party earlier in the evening, and when he walked in, there were 7 single women in their mid to late 30s, all Upper East Side blonde, wearing black cocktail dresses, and one wittier than the next. There's nothing you can say that's wrong, Roger said. For women, it's desperation combined with reaching their sexual peak. It's a very volatile combination. You see that look in their eyes, possession at any cost, mixed with a healthy respect for cash flow. And you feel like they're going to Lexus and Nexus you as soon as you leave the room. The worst thing is, most of these women are really interesting because they didn't just go and get married. But when a man sees that look in their eyes, how can you feel passionate? Back to Peter, who was working himself into a frenzy over Alec Baldwin. The problem is expectations. Older women don't want to settle for what's still available. They can't find guys who are cool and vital, so they say, screw it, I'd rather be alone. No, I don't feel sorry for anyone who has expectations they can't meet. I feel sorry for the loser guys who these women won't look at. What they really want is Alec Baldwin. There isn't one woman in New York who hasn't turned down 10 wonderful, loving guys because they were too fat, or they weren't powerful enough, or they weren't rich enough or indifferent enough. But those really sexy guys the women are holding out for are interested in girls in their mid-20s. It's true. I mean, look at Alec Baldwin and that wife he has. I mean, he's not even attractive anymore. He's fat. He's fat. And also an alleged murderer, but that's another thing. But look at that wife of his. She's like, what, 30 years younger than him and in perfect shape and still having babies and stuff? She's in her childbearing years. And he's like, what, 70? Yeah, that's always how it is. It just is. It just is. By now, Peter was practically screaming, why don't those women marry a fat guy? Why don't they marry a big fat tub of lard? Good friends, lousy husbands. I asked that very question to Charlotte, the English journalist. I'll tell you why, she said. I've gone out with some of those guys. Of course, she would have an accent, wouldn't she? Should I do my British accent for you? It's pretty bad, but my kids like it for Harry Potter. I've gone out with some of those guys, the ones who are short, fat, and ugly, and it doesn't make any difference. They're just as unappreciative and self-centered as the good-looking ones. By the time you get to your mid-30s and you're not married, you think, why should I settle? Charlotte said. She said she'd just turned down a date with a beautifully eligible, recently divorced 41-year-old banker because his unmentionable was too small. Index finger, she sighed. Then Sarah beeped in. She'd just gotten money to make her first independent film, and she was ecstatic. This idea of women not being able to get married, it's so small-minded. I can't even deal with it. If you want to get these guys, you have to shut up. You have to sit there and shut up and agree with everything they say. Luckily, my friend Amelita called and explained it all to me. Explained why terrific women are often alone and not happy about it, but not exactly desperate about it either. Oh, honey, she cooed into the phone. She was in a good mood because she'd had sex the night before with a 24-year-old law student. Everyone knows that men in New York make great friends and lousy husbands. In South America, where I come from, we have an expression, better alone than badly accompanied. And that's the end of chapter 4. So let me know in the comments below what you thought. Did you enjoy that chapter? And remember that next Friday will be chapter 5 right here on this channel. And don't forget to check out the merch. I've linked it in the description so that you can go see the merch page. There's a lot of fun things there. And if you have an idea for merch, please let me know and I'll create it. I'll create it for you. Maybe we should do one for the book club. Anyone think of anything witty and fun to stick on a mug for the book club? All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And the live chat's always fun, too. Thanks for being here. See you soon.